Hi, everyone. This is Mike with episode 76 of Getting Everyone Moving, brought to you by Palms Defines Parasports. Today, we're going to talk about sled hockey with April Wolfe. Hey, April.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. So tell us, how did you get involved in the sport of sled hockey?
Okay. So I am originally from London, Ontario, Canada, and it was called Thames Valley Children's Center. It was a rehab for children that looked to start a sled hockey program. So we started as a youth team. Obviously, in Canada, hockey is kind of like a given sport that you end up getting into. So started with a youth team there and helped kind of volunteer and coach that team, and then gained enough interest to start an adult team. And actually, as an able-bodied individual, was able to play on that adult team. We host one of the largest sled hockey tournaments with over 35 teams every year in London, Ontario.
Wow. And how did it feel for you to, play sled hockey? What is that like?
I think the cool part about sled hockey is that once everybody's sitting in a sled, you can't tell who has a disability or not. So it kind of creates a level playing field, and honestly, persons with disabilities that maybe propel a wheelchair on a regular basis can be much stronger in a sled because they're used to using those upper body muscles. So I think that's what makes that sport unique, that potentially a person with a disability could have their spouse or their sibling or their parent come play and be a part of a sport together.
So you're in Reno, Nevada, and it gets really hot there. And so what is the city of Reno doing in terms of sled hockey?
Yeah, so when I took my position with City of Reno in 2006, and at the time we didn't have an ice rink. So we only had outdoor ice skating in the winter when we could seasonally provide it and it wasn't getting melted. So in January of 2021, Reno Ice opened. It's a brand new privately owned indoor ice rink, and it was an opportunity for us to do a private-public partnership, and reached out to that rink to say, hey, would you be interested in supporting having sled hockey at this rink? And they were amazing, offering us an opportunity to give sled a try when they first opened, to providing ice time so that we can have weekly practices for our sled hockey program.
Well, it sounds really progressive for the city of Reno. I mean, to be involved in, adapted sports. I mean, what is it about the city, or who has really pushed, doing adapted sports?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I started with the city in 2006. In 2007, we hosted an accessibility summit at the convention center, and it was an opportunity to kind of find out where the gaps in service was in the area of adaptive sport. So that was an all-day summit, and then from that summit, we hosted follow-up focus groups with both youth athletes and adult athletes to find out what folks were interested in, how we could grow our programs. And so out of that, we got really great direction. We launched an adaptive equipment rental program because individuals with disabilities didn't want to show up at X time at certain price to participate in sport. And so like everyone else, they wanted to recreate on their own time. So it just made sense for us to make our equipment available to rent. So out of that, we got some great feedback as far as programming, how to communicate with the disability community, as well as making our equipment available to rent on the long-term basis.
So what kinds of equipment do you have? And I assume, so the city purchased all of that, or was it some of it donated, or?
Yeah, so a lot of it has been obtained through various grants. So both private foundations or federal funding. So when I first started, we had no adaptive recreation equipment. Now I'm taking over every storage niche I can find in a building.
Right.
So we have everything from beach wheelchairs to hand cycles, a ton of adaptive mountain bikes, which seems to be the new very popular thing to be doing. We rent sports wheelchairs, so all of our equipment is now available to rent.
So you've really been the champion of the program, but the city, knew your background and brought you in so that you could really expand offerings.
Yeah, so my background is in recreation therapy. So I got a degree in recreation therapy, and I'm a certified recreation therapist. I came into the city kind of just with the focus of inclusion and making sure our traditional parks and recreation programs were accessible for people with disabilities. But like things like Blaze Sports and Paralympic sport clubs and those things helped us kind of grow our adaptive recreation program. It was kind of a supportive net in order to be able to apply for grants or have different clinics for specific sports. So that really launched all of our adaptive recreation programs in 2008.
Okay, so that's 13 years. That's terrific. Let's go back to sled hockey a little bit. So talk about the sport. I mean, how many people are on ice at one time? How long are the periods? How does it all work?
So sled hockey is really very similar to traditional hockey. You know, the 3 periods, 20 minutes, obviously making quick changes on the ice, a little shorter time on the ice than, you know, stand-up players because your arms tire much more quickly than your legs. So same, you know, goalies and positions as far as forwards and defensemen. So, you know, for a successful team, like you want to recruit at least, you know, double of what you need on the ice. So like if you need, you know, 5 players and a goalie, that, you know, ideally you want to try to recruit, you know, 12 to 14 players so you can have those folks switch out. So we just have a great opportunity to, you know, any type of disability can participate. We have, you know, specialized amputee sleds, as well as, you know, if somebody has a higher level injury and they may need a push bar. So the sport is really inclusive to anybody and any type of disability. And
talk a little bit about, you know, what's going on in the Western region. I know there's some new teams coming aboard in Pacific Northwest and
yeah, so we're really excited. You know, obviously when I lived in Canada, you could drive an hour or 2 hours to go play a tournament or a team. We're a little bit more spread out on the West Coast, you know, anywhere from 4 to 8 hours to find the closest teams. But there are teams, you know, popping up. You know, Vegas has both an adult and kids team. There's a new team in Seattle. There's, you know, San Jose has a children's team, but they're trying to grow an adult team. So I think this is a growing sport, and the Pacific District is very supportive of all the new teams, you know, encouraging teams to come and just do a camp or come be an exhibition team, because they really want to grow the sport. So if it means we're swapping players so that it's a good opportunity for everybody, I think this district is really supportive of, you know, growing the sport of sled hockey.
Okay. I know that in, you know, wheelchair basketball, there's a whole feeder system, you know, youth up to adults, collegiate level. Does sled hockey have that same kind of feeder system? And if not, you know, what do you think that can be done to create something like that?
So there isn't a great feeder system. I think it depends on your community. You know, here in Reno, you know, working with adaptive PE teachers in the school district and trying to identify kids that might be interested in trying a new adaptive sport. We plan to host a second Give Sled a Try in September before the season kicks off, so that hopefully if we miss folks back in February when, you know, all of us are a little bit still locked down with COVID and they maybe didn't want to come out in February, hopefully we find those folks in September and they join our team when we start up in October. So I think still giving multiple opportunities to do recruitment throughout your season to try to find kids or adults that maybe didn't discover the sport earlier.
Okay. Now, does Canada have the best Paralympic team then?
I think they just lost to the US, so I'm not sure. There's a recent Worlds tournament, so you might have to look that up, but I think we may have made it into the finals with Canada and US, but I believe US came ahead on that. They have some amazing players.
But next year is the Paralympics, right? So
yeah.
The winter. So, okay. So we'll see. Maybe Canada has a chance for redemption then.
Yes.
It'd be good. So we've talked a little bit about the costs offline. You know, in starting a program, obviously you need equipment and such, but how do you go about obtaining equipment, and what are some of the costs, you know, that are involved in establishing a program?
Sure. So obviously there's, you know, specialized equipment in order to play the sport of sled hockey. So there's a couple manufacturers that actually build the sleds themselves. So that bucket style seat with the blades underneath, and then specialized sticks that have picks in the end in order to kind of pick into the ice to move and then put down to shoot. So obviously a startup program is going to need to acquire various sizes and sleds for their program. You know, we were lucky enough that we had 5 sleds previously from just public ice skating that we had at our outdoor rink. And then we partnered with a private foundation to purchase the rest of our startup equipment. USA Hockey has great opportunities as far as their Lend a Sled program, and they also were able to also lend us some of that protective equipment when our team just started up. So, you know, helmets, gloves, and elbows are kind of the mandatory kind of minimum of equipment to be out on the ice. But I think the biggest expense is ice time. So partnering with your ice rink to potentially get a reduced cost for that ice time, or finding a foundation or a donor that's willing to cover your ice time, because that's the biggest expense going into the sport.
Oh, okay. Can you tell us, you know, in coaching adapted sports, I mean, I find that it really helps people. I mean, socially, you know, emotionally, obviously physically. Can you tell us some stories of some of the athletes that you've worked with, and, you know, some of the changes or that you've seen in the athletes, and how, you know, playing has really helped them?
I think it's fun to, you know, you start off a season and everybody's blades are set, you know, fairly wide apart in order to keep their balance, because I think that's the hardest thing. Even as an able-bodied player, if you jump in a sled and you've never tried it before, just trying to stay upright is half your battle versus propelling yourself forward. So for us, you know, we held our Give Sled event and then had some ice time over the summer. It was just fun to see athletes each week say, okay, I'm ready to move my blades in a little bit more, and the following week a little bit more. So with the goal of trying to get those blades as narrow as possible so that they can maneuver their sled, kind of using their hip function. And so I think that's been really fun to watch that progression. And we're excited to be able to send actually one of our new players to the women's sled hockey camp that's happening at the end of July, to hopefully gain her some additional skills, and then maybe a potential selection for the women's US team. So it's really neat to see the folks that have really taken a liking to the sport. I actually already have 2 players that have gone out and purchased their own customized sleds because they're way into it. So it's just really neat to watch that passion for the sport and that progression.
Have you found any difficulties in recruiting athletes to play the sport? Because it seems like, you know, it might be a little bit difficult. I mean, you need balance, right? You need upper body strength. It might be a little bit difficult, you know, to play, and it might be a higher skill level.
So I think just, you know, the supportive nature of adaptive sport, that if somebody comes out and they're new and they might need some additional support to be successful, I think this community is about, you know, championing around somebody. So I think it is a welcoming sport, and having programs have their own program equipment to offer. So there's not that additional expense just to try the sport and decide, you know, whether you like it or not. I think is really helpful, so that we're able to provide that equipment for that startup. And if they get way into it, then they can purchase their own personal equipment. But I think that's what makes adaptive sports successful, is that opportunity to, you know, use program equipment until they figure it out and develop a passion for the sport.
Do you find that athletes cross-train? Because you offer other adaptive sports, right?
Yeah, so I definitely see, and that's kind of where your recruitment can come into. So, you know, I have a lot of players that are on our wheelchair basketball team that I've said, come over and try sled hockey. So it's a great recruitment source. Unfortunately, all their seasons seem to be the same. So wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball, and sled hockey are all the same identical season, but it allows us to kind of recruit from other adaptive sports and have folks give a different sport a try.
Yeah. So what other kinds of things are you doing to, you know, increase the number of athletes that participate? I know you have this program coming up in September, but how do you reach out to the community, or is it a word of mouth thing?
Yeah, so obviously word of mouth helps. You know, once players try it, they can tell their friends about it. We also put out a quarterly newsletter called the Adaptive Connect. So we'll put information in our Adaptive Connect. We have our own Facebook page, so City of Reno Adaptive. We did a ton of press releases in partnership with the ice rink and USA Hockey. So kind of leveraging the Reno ice community as well as City of Reno, kind of help grow and build our sport.
Okay. All right. And what are some final words that you'd like to leave with people? Just, any kind of messages about adaptive sports?
I think, recreation is for everybody. And so if you've had an injury and you don't think you can do a sport you've done before, or maybe it looks different, I encourage you to go out and try the various adaptive sports that are available, because everybody should be able to have an opportunity to recreate.
Great. Well, thank you, April. That was great.
Thank you.